Hello everyone and welcome back to another average review. And today's pretty exciting because I'm going to be reviewing my first JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Super Action statue figure. I've never mentioned it before, but I really love the series JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I've watched the first 6 parts of the anime, and I ended up reading the manga versions of parts 7 and 8 since, I genuinely just couldn't wait for the part 7 anime to drop. But that's besides the point, because today we're taking a look at the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Super Action Statue Diavolo. Now, looking at the packaging, and it's very different from a lot of other boxes I've seen, mainly figures in America, since this is an import figure. We can see Diavolo's name on the side along with the Super Action Statue logo, along with the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure logo. Looking on the side, we have this really cool graphic of the figure of Diavolo along with his name and this, JoJo logo up here. There's a lot of really ornate details on this green box that are pretty subtle, but really add to the premium feel of this figure. That same image, with all the graphics and stuff is on the other side. And on the back, we see more shots of the figure, along with a showing of the accessories, along with the alternate head and the stand. No, not as in King Crimson, a stand for the figure. And looking at the top, we see some of the graphics we saw on the sides. The JoJo logo and the little purple graphics surrounding it. So overall, yeah, the box for this Diavolo figure is pretty dang cool, but come on. Let's get this guy out of his packaging and see what the Super Action statue line has to offer. Alright, getting Diavolo out of the box, and I forgot to mention it when I was talking about the packaging, but obviously there's going to be spoilers ahead for Part 5 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind, since, it's a figure of the main villain whose identity is, a central mystery for, most of the actual part. So, if you haven't seen Part 5 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, go watch it, and also the rest of the series, obviously. Part 5 isn't going to make a lick of sense without it. And it's also really good. But either way, looking at this figure of Diavolo, and it is very accurate to Araki's art of Diavolo, and of course the anime version, because the anime is pretty much lifted straight from the original manga in terms of art direction. Starting off with the head sculpt, and it's very well done. They definitely captured, Diavolo's face for the most part. I do feel like this expression is a little blank for Diavolo, but there's an alternate head that does fix that. And even then, I feel like the disinterest on his face would have been fixed if they just gave him a slightly more noticeable scowl. So then it would have just been a regular, not in a good mood head sculpt for Diavolo, because he never is. Taking an even closer look at the paintwork and sculpting on the head, and there's a couple details that we can see with this close of a look. You can see that they actually bothered to paint the weird little pattern in Diavolo's pupils that he has, which is a really good attention to detail, and it's really, really precise to have this, painted like this, just on any figure, even an expensive one. And a spectacular job was also done on his, eyelashes and mascara. The lipstick is painted pretty well. There's actually some, there's some color in his cheeks, which is a pretty nice touch. And his hair is really well sculpted. It's super flowy and well textured. And they do have the spots, but one thing I didn't notice until actually getting this figure about Diavolo's design is that the spots on his hair are green. I always thought they were black, and I would kind of prefer if they were black, but this is accurate to Araki's design, so, not a fault with the figure itself. I should also mention, they do have the weird, I don't know what to call this, the sort of lightning bolt pattern bald spot. I don't know the actual term for this kind of thing in hair, but they have it right here, and it's sculpted and painted fairly well. Moving down to the torso, and Diavolo's, fishnet stocking things for his chest are very well sculpted and painted. There are some small spots where there's, messed up paint, right here underneath his abs, the paint is a little messed up, but it'd probably be a fairly easy repaint if you're precise, you know, since, I mean, it's just a shiny black paint. And either way, the rest of it is super well done. I mean, it's just so detailed. And there's actually highlights for his musculature underneath the actual, like, you know, fishnets, which is very impressive. And it might be even more detailed on the back, which is amazing. It, of course, continues on to his arms, and we see how well they did with the awesome tattoos that Diavolo has. Now, I do actually have a complaint about the way these tattoos are painted, and it's that they don't continue on to this separate elbow piece right here, which sort of breaks up the design, and I'm not the biggest fan of that. I feel like that really should have been painted, you know. But moving to the lower torso, and once again, there's highlights for the musculature, and once more, the rest of the pieces of, you know, is like fishnet lingerie, I guess you'd call it, is very, very well done. And also the anatomy, pretty good, although I will say, up around here, I feel like, you know, the shoulders should stick out just ever so slightly more, like just by a little bit. Know what I mean? But I will say, these little, I guess, extensions of the fishnets are very well done and accurate. I'm sort of worrying about these breaking if you pose the legs too much, because, I mean, they are like a pretty thin plastic, and they aren't super, like, rubbery or soft or anything, so that might be something to watch out for. I think his purple pants actually might have highlighting, like the actual, torso, or at least the upper thighs, which is a very nice touch. The belt is painted pretty well along with the buckle, and you can see plenty of sculpted, you know, fabric wrinkles and stuff. He does have these little, these golden, like, balls on, like, around his hips, which are very well sculpted, and the fronts are well painted, but the sides do kind of look incomplete. I wish they were painted a bit better. Granted, those would probably bleed onto the actual pants if they, you know, cut it too close to the edge, but I don't know, I feel like it could have been done. There's still some highlights on the back of his legs, though, which is a nice touch, and they do continue on down to the knees. You can see more of these golden balls down by the edges of his pants. You can also see his actual legs sticking out, which is a pretty nice detail, and his shoes are pretty dang well sculpted and painted, and they even have differently colored, you know, soles on the bottom, which is, once again, a very nice touch. So, overall, this Diavolo is unbelievably well sculpted and painted. He's super accurate to his design from both the manga and anime. And overall, just on his own, looks really good with all, like, the highlighted, you know, like, shading on, you know, the musculature and the pants. Not to mention the sculpting of the hair and the intricacy of, you know, the fishnets on his chest and the tattoos. Will say, though, I wish the actual, like, shoulder blades of the torso stuck out a bit more, and the tattoos continued on to the elbow piece right here, but those are my only real complaints with the actual sculpting and paintwork. But that ain't everything that a figure needs to be good. It's also got to have good articulation, so let's see if the super action statue line lives up to the super in its name. And hopefully doesn't live up to the statue part. Alright, looking at the head and neck articulation, and Diavolo actually has a very small ball joint on a disc hinge, along with, I assume, a ball joint in the neck. Unfortunately, he cannot look up that far because of his very long hair, but he does get a fair bit of looking down. He gets a tiny bit of tilt side to side, mainly thanks to the ball joint neck, and gets a little turning side to side, but once again, blocked by all that hair. Now, moving on to the arms, and it's a type of articulation I've never seen for shoulders, which I guess I'd call a double ball socket. It's sort of like a dumbbell joint that you see in, like, for head articulation in action figures, but for the arms instead, it gets them a really good amount of wobbling around. Now, they can, of course, spin, and the shoulder is actually a separate piece, which can also spin on its own, which is a good enough replacement for bicep swivel since this figure doesn't have any. But, of course, it does hinge upwards to get a little bit above 90 degrees, I'd say. Like I said, no bicep swivel, but the shoulder actually turning like this on the actual, like, ball socket does sort of make up for that. He's also got double jointed knees with a very good bend thanks to those fairly slender arms. But that's not it, since the double jointed elbows also swivel side to side at both the bicep and at the forearm, which is a very nice touch. Now, this Diavolo does have, I usually call them McFarlane style wrist pegs since they use them a lot, where it can turn at the base of the forearm and at the base of the hand and hinge in pretty much any direction, but unfortunately, the hinging is actually blocked by the wristband that he has, so he only gets a little bit of wrist articulation. Does spin all the way around, though. Now, moving on to the torso articulation, and he's got a diaphragm joint and a ball-jointed waist. He unfortunately doesn't get much hunch forward, which is a little disappointing for a figure like this that's meant to be super articulated, but he has a really great arch back, which is good to see. He also has tilt side to side and a tiny bit of twist in the upper and lower torso, but they're both blocked by the pieces below them, being, the lower torso and the pants, since they're both a very, solid, hard plastic. He does have ball-jointed hips, which actually get a fair bit of turning side to side, which does let you kick them up a little above 90 degrees, which is pretty impressive. They don't really get much of a split, which is a little disappointing, but the figure does, of course, have double jointed knees with a pretty good bend. Similar to the elbows, and up near the thigh, this does rotate. Unfortunately, it doesn't rotate lower down, since it's a different type of joint, not the sort of ball socket like this. But moving down to the ankle articulation, and it of course hinges forward and backwards, pivots side to side at least a little, and also rotates around. And of course, since this is a super articulated figure, he's got a bit of toe articulation. So overall, Diavolo's articulation is pretty decent. I mean, we gotta cut him some slack for the lacking head articulation because of the flowing hair. I just wish the hunch forward was better. Definitely would help with a lot more dynamic poses that you'd probably want to get this figure into. Moving on to the figure comparisons, and since I unfortunately don't have any other JoJo's Bizarre Adventure figures, I'm mainly going to be comparing this Diavolo with other similarly scaled figure lines. So starting off with the standard male and female comparisons, we have the Marvel Legends Renew Your Vows, Spider-Man, and Spinneret. You can see that they're a bit taller than him, but that's probably because Diavolo is more close to an actual 6-inch scale. Meanwhile, Marvel Legends is more 6 1/4, 6.5 inch scale. They're a little bigger is what I'm trying to say. Lines though, we have 2 Cobra Ninjas from the G.I. Joe Classified series. For figures that are already too tall for a line like Marvel Legends, let alone a smaller 6-inch figure like this, though, we have the McFarlane DC Multiverse versions of Silver Age Superman and Batman. Speaking of Batman, though, for the only other import figure like this that I do have, we have the Amazing Yamaguchi version of Batman. I hope I pronounced that name right. Nice try, Diavolo, but I'm blocking your time skip ability with a technique I learned from Hamon-trained monks in Tibet. But, as is tradition, here's the super action statue Diavolo with the Marvel Legends hit Monkey and Goliath. Alright, now moving on to the accessories, and there's some pretty cool things included, but some pretty frustrating ones that weren't included. Starting off with the alternate hands, and Diavolo of course comes packed with a pair of fists. He also comes with a pair of fully open hands for more relaxed or neutral poses, but I don't think Diavolo's ever been super relaxed. For some mismatched hands, though, and Diavolo comes with this alternate open gestury hand for his right hand, which also sort of works as a pointing hand. He also comes with this more flat-fisted left hand, which I believe is actually for a very specific accessory he comes with, which we'll get back to later. That's all for the left hands he comes with, but he comes with 2 extra right hands. He comes with this open-handed bleeding right hand, which I believe is from the second fight that Polnareff had with Diavolo, the one in the Coliseum, where he actually managed to get a slash on Diavolo during his time skip. Which I think is a pretty cool inclusion. Even if it's not from that specific scene, either way, still a pretty cool option. But, finally, for the alternate hands, he comes with this accessory holding right hand, which is pretty much a fisted hand with a small hole in it. Now, the question is, what is this hand for? Well, it's for an accessory that doesn't come with this figure. It's meant to be for the stand arrow that comes with the Part 5 release of Silver Chariot, which is a really cool inclusion for that figure, and also pretty necessary since it comes with parts for, like, a mid-transformation Chariot Requiem, at least, like, when Silver Chariot got stabbed with the stand arrow. But also, I don't get why they didn't include one with Diavolo. It doesn't even have to be the golden beetle arrow from, the Coliseum. Diavolo unearthed like 6 stand arrows, including that one. They could have just included a generic one. And then this hand wouldn't be useless for someone who just doesn't have the Part 5 Chariot figure. But I do have a sorta homemade solution to this problem, which is my own custom stand arrow. Basically, I took an arrow accessory that came with the McFarlane DC Digital Longbow Hunter's green arrow, cut it in half, and repainted it to match the color scheme of the beetle arrow from the finale of Part 5. It's not exact, but it fits in this alternate hand really well, and it does work as, a substitute. Still, I feel like some kind of stand arrow should have come with this figure. But that's not it for accessories, since Diavolo also comes with an alternate, grinning like a maniac head, which is really cool. It's got a lot of the same details as the neutral head, except, a different expression, but one reason I really, really like this head sculpt, besides the fact that it's more expressive, is the fact that there's even more details in Diavolo's crazy eye pattern, which really does look like he's sort of cutting loose and getting ready to just absolutely decimate someone. He also comes with this really cool accessory, which is a mid-removal, Doppio sweater to recreate that scene, once again, right before the fight with Polnareff in the Coliseum, where Doppio takes off his sweater, and then, boom, out comes Diavolo from the other side of the pillar. I wonder where Doppio went. And I wonder how Diavolo snuck behind that pillar while Doppio was just walking right behind it. Kind of weird. Diavolo also comes with a stand. No, not King Crimson, I mean a figure stand. It's a translucent plastic, and it's got an arm with, 3 joints on the back and a peg to plug into a peg hole on Diavolo's back, which does make for some pretty cool mid-air poses or just standing him on the ground. Just, more secure than just balancing him. One cool thing about the stand is that it's very hard to see, but on the translucent base, you can see the Japanese JoJo's Bizarre Adventure logo, which is pretty cool, but my stand is actually a little defective, and it's just that this back piece slides off because I assume the glue isn't just properly in place, unlike the other side, which is perfectly fine. It's nothing major. I have to, go out of my way to make it a problem by, taking it off, and then I can just put it back on, but it's kind of weird. Alright, as I always say, it's time for the least fun part of any figure review, talking about the price. Now, this Diavolo, if you're looking on, say, a Japanese import site, he'll probably cost you between $50 to $60, somewhere in that range, usually around $55, which I'd say on its own would be pretty good for this figure. I mean, it's not perfect. I do wish he came with some extra accessories, which I'll get to, but it's not the worst thing in the world. This figure's pretty high quality. But since if you're ordering from America, there's going to be a lot of extra costs such as shipping and tariffs and taxes. Especially if you're ordering from an import site. So, yeah. Collecting figures like this, if you're, overseas from Japan, can be a bit of a sting to the wallet. Which is a shame, because on its own, this is a good figure with alright accessories. I do feel like there were some missed opportunities with the accessories. Like I said, I feel like he could have just come with a generic stand arrow. Since, that would have worked perfectly fine with the accessory holding hand, and it wouldn't have devalued the Part 5 Silver Chariot, since that one has the unique beetle stand arrow. I also feel like he should have come with some accessories related to Doppio besides a folded up sweater. Even just a single alternate head, even if it wouldn't actually fit the body since it's, Diavolo's outfit, I would have appreciated that. It would make for a pretty good custom with like a soft goods sweater or even just a sculpted over one. It would have been cool. Granted, I get why that would be a problem, since like I said, wouldn't match the outfit and it would require a lot more accessories to get an actual Doppio look. And at that point, you'd just be reusing the pants and that's it, so honestly, might as well be a separate release that's also pretty redundant. But an alternate head that I feel like Diavolo definitely should have come with is like a super crazy looking screaming head, because he did that a fair bit. And it would make for some really dynamic poses, like if you're trying to recreate one of the many scenes of him just like leaping at someone ready to just absolutely destroy them with King Crimson, or if you're recreating some of his infinite death loops or just making some up. Point is, this is a good figure, but I feel like some of the accessories were a bit of a missed opportunity. Either way, though, this Diavolo is really, really good. Articulation is very good, minus the hunch forward. That leaves a bit to be desired. And the sculpt is phenomenal. I will say I wish the shoulder blades back here stuck out a little more. I felt like that would have looked a tiny bit better, but that's my only nitpick with the sculpt. Paintwork also spectacular. Highlights are super well done, and I'm especially impressed by, the fishnets on his torso. So, overall, I think I'm going to give the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Super Action Statue Diavolo an 8 out of 10. Really good figure, and I'm glad this is my introduction to the Super Action Statue line, especially considering Diavolo is one of my favorite characters. But I feel like, like I said, some of the accessories were a missed opportunity. Either way, though, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, especially since, I'm reviewing a different type of figure than usual. And also, have a great day, 'cause you deserve it. Bye-bye!